Hi, and welcome to SPP Industries and our tutorial on the assembly of the Romasafe Childsafe Roman Shade. Throughout this tutorial, we're going to take you step by step through every process from the start of laying out your skin all the way through to the finished product, such as the blind that you'll see behind me here. It should be noted that throughout this video, we've actually interjected it with some video from the Romatech Roman Shade system. So you will see some head rails with cords on them. As it says during the video, please disregard that. It is about the banded system, which if you follow through to the end, you will see. Thank you. Before we get started on the assembly of the Roman blind, I'd like to point out a couple of tools that you will see me using during the process, and I'll show you what they actually do and why they were designed. The first tool that we have is what we call our applicator. Now, one of the benefits of working with the system is we have a from saw to skin process. So that means that this can actually be cut directly on the saw. Doesn't need to be filed, doesn't need to be trimmed or anything. The sharp edges are not a problem with this system. Now, I'll show you what we've got here is a piece of block-out fabric. Okay, this is the block-out line, same as the fabric that we're using here on the blind behind us. And I'd like to show you what will happen with this if we don't use the applicator. So we put our spline in, as you can see. Go to put our batten on. Now remember, this is a full block-out fabric. Now I've just got to slide that on with my fingers. Guide it on there. Now you can see what I've done. We can't get a really good look there, but you can probably get a very good look here. You can see here the damage caused to that. That's ruined now. That piece of fabric is absolutely ruined. Let me show you again. Fold it in a different spot. Same piece of profile. The batten with the patented applicator. We'll push it along. See how much easier that slides on. Now what I'll do is take this off and have a look at that. You can see the difference between the two. You can see that the one there is completely damaged and the other one, there's not a mark. That's the secret behind the applicator. Now we have exactly the same system, which I'll show you for our base rail, our no-sew base rail. If I was to do exactly the same thing, straight from the saw, straight to the table. Exactly the same thing happens, as you can see. Hopefully you can see without the glare. There we are. As you can see, that's ruined. Then we'll try that again with the applicator. These can be a little bit tight when they're first used, but they do loosen up. Straight on. Straight off. No problems, no tears, no rips. If you're currently making Roman shades of any kind, you don't need me to tell you how difficult it is to get them square, to get them straight, and to get your pocket spacing calculations correct. It can be very time consuming, and you do need fairly specifically trained people to be able to do this job. Well, that was before, this is now. What we have done is we have designed an adhesive tape that fits onto a 60mm wide aluminium straight edge, such as this. Now what this does will become self-explanatory when we get into the tutorial part of the laying up of the shade, but basically it does your mathematics for you. By utilising the panel spacings chart, what we're going to do in the blind that we're going to manufacture in this tutorial, it's going to be a 1.55 metre drop, so 155 centimetres. So what we do is we look up to 155, which we can see on here, which is 155. Next to that, it has the numeral D8. Now, what that D8 refers to is our straight edge, which has all of the numerals and the numbers written on it. We need to follow and draw a line on every D up to number 8, and that will give you your perfect pocket spacing for the fold of that particular shade. It's as easy as that. Okay, now the time has come that we start to use our straight edges, and you remember earlier in this section we're doing a drop of 155, so our lines are measured at D8. Okay, so I've already pre-cut my skin to the correct width. I'm going to assume for this video's sake that you already have equipment to cut a skin for a roller blind, which is really all you need, or some form of cutting equipment. So we're going to start the video from the time that you've cut your skin to the size it required. Now our blind is 1030 wide, so that's obviously the width that we've cut. Our drop is 1550. Now I've added an extra 40 centimetres to allow for the head rail and for the base rail and the take up of the fabric for the battens when we place those on. You'll need to have that excess fabric. Okay, so we'll get started. What I've already done is I've got my straight edges on the table here, as you can see. I've placed one right against the edge of the table there, and I've measured from the inside across to 1030, and I've clamped that in place. I've come down to the other end down here. I've done the same thing and I've clamped that in place. So we know that our skin is the right width, okay, so that'll fit perfectly into those straight edges. As you can see, that sits in there very, very comfortably. So we'll just unroll this all the way out, pop it into place. Now, if you're doing a very wide blind, what we suggest that you do is actually tape it to the top of the table, the fabric, so it can't move when you're sliding your straight edge down. That's the last thing you really want to happen, because then your lines will be out of whack. Okay, so our straight edge, first line that we're going to mark is up the top here. It says no sew head rail line. Now that's what we're going to be using. We'll be using a chain drive head rail. So we're going to draw a line across there. And then there's another line under that that says top dash start of blind. We also want to draw that one. That's just for a reference, really, which we'll show you a little bit later on. Now, as we specified, we're going to be doing D8. So I locate D1 as my first, across the table there. And what I will do, I'll just draw a line across. Now, if you've got a wider blind, again, you'll have a longer straight edge, you'll have somebody on the other side helping you. You'll just call out the numbers, you say D2, they'll go to D2, and then you draw your line across. But for this size blind, it's quite easy to do, just one. Now, this is repetitive. I'm going D1, D2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's all the same. So I'll speed this up to get down to the end of D8. And there we are. Okay, now that we've done our lines, what we're going to do is we're going to turn our skin so the lining facing down. And we'll start to put on our battens. Okay. Now, I have a confession to make. I've cheated a little bit here. I'm using the same skin that I used on the Romasafe tutorial. I've just pulled it apart so that we can now do it for the Romasafe. It's slightly different when we go to put on the battens, but the folding, everything's exactly the same. So I'll take you through step by step with that one now. So again, we've done our lines. So now we've flipped our fabric back coating down face up. We're going to crease our lines again. So we fold the fabric across, find our line, and do a crease. Now that's nice and easy because I've already done it in the previous tutorial. Okay, so we slide in our spline. Exactly the same process as the Romasafe. And the hint that my staff gave me is that what you do is give it a little squirt of silicone in the top. If you've got a really long blind, it can sometimes be a bit tricky to slide it all the way across. It can be a bit tight. So we want to do it this way. Now hold the clear spline and the fabric together. You're pinching that together. You introduce the applicator to the fabric. And you push the rod. You don't pull from the applicator. That's a no-no. You actually push the rod onto, put your hand here, put your hand onto there, and the end cap stops it going too far. Take off your applicator at the end. Job's done. But where we differ is we don't put the end cap on the other end yet, okay? We just do the one side and we roll up. Crease again. Now this is the same process. Again, we have to put on 8 battens, so I'm going to fast forward this 8 times. Remember, you're not putting your end cap on the other end. There we are. So that's laying up the Romasafe battens. And the reason that we don't put the end caps on the end like we do with the Romatech is we need to put in our band guides. Now that's every second batten from the top. So you come down and you put 2 in each. Slide those in. If you have a wider blind, you'll need to put in 3. You'll notice that when we bring our headrail across, it's got 2 spools, so we know that we only need two band guides on each batten. But if you've got a very wide blind, you could need up to 5 on each batten. Okay, now that they're in, we put our end caps on the end. There we are. Now that is our Romasafe skin ready to have the headrail attached. First step that we do is we take a roll of double-sided tape and we put it just underneath the very top line. Remember we drew 2 lines earlier. The very top line and then we had one underneath. Okay, so as you can see we had our 2 lines. 1, 2, so our tape is put just underneath that top line. Now we cut that away. Peel off our tape. And apply our headrail spline to the very top of the blind on that double-sided tape. Just trim that off. It's okay there and there. Okay, get our headrail. Now what we do here, we fold over on the edge of that spline. It's a 15mm spline. It has to be around that size. If it's any smaller, it won't work. It will fall through the headrail. You need to have at least 15mm. What we do, okay, now hopefully you can see the way that is folded in there. You have your fold here and it sits inside that edge, like that. Then pop in our end cap. Okay, now we'll turn the blind around. Sit it up at the top of the table. Bring it down. Now it's a good idea here, if you can, hopefully you can see this. Now what I'm going to do is clamp the headrail level with the end of the table. We need to work out what our dropper is going to be. Now we know already that our dropper is established at 155, but you can see when I pull this, there's a lot of spring in that blind. So what you always want to try and work from the middle of the blind, put your tape measure up to the headrail, like this, and then pull until you've taken the slack out of the blind. You can sort of feel the point where it's going to want to spring back or stay down. So that's where you really want to be, to that point. Push your tape measure right up, and we do our mark at 155, which is where we want our drop to be. Okay. Now the next step is to grab your ruler and push it up into the bottom of that rail there, and you can find your mark, and you mark it, it's one, in this case it's 17 centimetres. So I'm doing a mark at 17 centimetres. You draw a line across there. Now this is going to be for a covered base rail. So what we're going to do now for a covered base rail is we're going to measure up from that line 5 centimetres and then down from that point 89 millimetres. So up 5 centimetres, down 89. Up 5, down 89. Now we draw both those lines. And it's the very bottom line that you cut away. So you can see there, I hope you can see we still have 2 lines. This is basically going to be the drop of your blind, the very bottom. This is where we need to fold to attach our base rail. Okay, so when you get to this step, we need to fold that up face to face, find that crease line, or that marked line. And like you did with your profile, fold on that line. So this is how it should look. Fold it on this line here. One line there and your base, okay? And exactly the same as we did with our profile, we now have our base rail. Just a little squirt silicone. Our base rail applicator. This is a new one. They can be a little bit tricky when they're brand new to get on, but they do loosen up after a while. Exactly the same system as before. Okay, now fold that back out again, so you've got your base rail and your line and the end of the blind there. Now what we need to do is get our double-sided tape. Place it on the front of the blind. This does not have to be in the exact position. If you're a little bit crooked, it doesn't matter, it's fine. It's just there to adhere the fabric to the front. That's all. Next step, we stand it up, fold it down, and you will see when you folded that back over, that second line should be right underneath where the base rail is, so you know you're right on the money. That's exactly where the drop needed to be. Okay, the next step, with the double-sided tape, you push that against the top opening of the base rail itself. Don't actually stick it to the top part, just underneath the opening. You can actually see this in a lot more detail if you have a look at the Romasafe base rail application and how to assemble. It's a tutorial on the base rails. It explains all this in detail. We now fold that up. Now we introduce a very important tool. I'm not sure what overseas visitors will call this, but we call this a butter knife, found in every kitchen drawer. using the back of the butter knife, push your fabric down into the slot. So I'm pushing that way into the slot, as you can see. Now once I've done that, I then reverse and I push this way. And that locks the fabric into the channel with the tape, the excess tape that we had over that opening. Now the next step is our silencio. Cut a little arrow. Again, all of this is explained in detail in the tutorial for the base rails. This seals the deal. This locks the fabric right into that channel, and it also stops that annoying noise that you might find with base rails when they're clanging along window edges. Box cutter, just trim that to size. Your end caps. And that's that part complete. You may get a few little stray. This is a very textured fabric. You get a few rings, you snip those off as you go. When we're dealing with our banded head rail and our bands, what you need to do is have your bands fully extended all the way out so you can look at your spools and make sure that the bands are in exactly the same position. That's very important, otherwise your blind will pull up unlevel. Okay, but to make that a little bit easier in transport is you simply turn, curl them up, roll the bands up. Just slide a little paper clip over the top and that'll hold them in position for you when you're moving your head rail and everything that you need to do. Okay, so now our head rail is mounted with our bands. So we'll remove the paper clip and thread our band through the band guides that we put on earlier. It is very, very important that these bands are not creased in any way, otherwise you'll ruin them, they won't roll up properly. Now after you've laid your bands out, get your band guides or centre them to your spool. You can just do this by eye, that's quite easy. And then with your bottom one, you attach the locking buttons. Now this is only on the bottom. These simply go in like the twist ring. They sit in and then turn to lock it into position. Now if you're slightly out, you can move the band, as you can see here, by hand and then slide your little locking button up to it. Easy to adjust on the rack. Only necessary to do that on the very bottom one. All the rest will just move and self-align as the blind's going up. Okay, now the next step, in the bottom of our band, or first of all, yes, we've threaded our band through. We'll do the bottom of the band. That's just a little offcut of your profile. End cap. Slide that on. What that does is that stops the band from coming through the bottom of the band guide. Okay, so now we're ready to put it up onto the rack and have a look. pull your chain and bring the bands up. That'll just make it a little bit easier for you to get it over onto the rack here. There we are. Okay, now it's just a simple matter of lowering. It's looking pretty good. Okay, now once you've done that, a very important thing to realise with the band system, as opposed to the Romasafe, inside here we have a brake. Now what that'll do is that'll stop, when you pull these chains normally, you can keep pulling that chain, it'll go down and then it'll come back up again. You don't want that, because what that'll do is crease the mylar and go up the opposite way, and it'll render the blinds useless. It'll be very, very crooked. So what we do need to do is to adjust the brake so that it doesn't go down too far. So we take that about an inch lower. That looks pretty good. And we simply go up here and we turn, slide across and lock, and that's our bottom limit set. So it can't go any further. Now, if you'd like to do the same thing for the top, we take it up to where we want it to stop. So approximately right about there, looks pretty good. Now we get our, we tighten that up and that's it, that's the job done. Take this across a little bit more there. Okay, and there's our top limit done. And bottom limit. Very important part about the band system also is because it's child safe, your pockets can be as wide as you want them to be. There's no limitations on the distance between seams. And there is the Romasafe blind. Well, I hope you found this tutorial informative, and we've gone some way to show you how easy it is to manufacture a child-safe Roman shade. Please feel free to jump onto our website to look for other tutorials on the Romatek Romasafe products. If you require any further information, please feel free to contact us at any time. Thank you. Very important part about the band system also is because it's child safe, your pockets can be as wide as you want them to be. There's no limitations on the distance between seams. And there is the Romasafe blind.